Hello, and welcome to another interview with Chuck Sr. and Chuck Jr. And today we're talking about my grandpa's near death. This is episode 3. Today is April the 9th, 2020, and I'm in my home in Ocean Beach, San Diego. And my dad, Chuck Sr., is at home in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. How are you today, Dad?
Beautiful day, Chuck, and I'm doing great. Thanks. I hope you are too.
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. So let's start off and hear your thoughts on what's going on with the pandemic these days. Your current thoughts.
I've got a few. In our last episode, I vented quite a bit about the fighting between Trump and the media, saying I didn't like it. I wanted to stick more to less vindictive fighting and give us more information on things we need to do. And I was pleased that this morning's Wall Street Journal, the lead editorial said the same thing. So I guess did they see our program? Maybe they saw our video. I don't know. Be a day ahead of them. But I know things are getting better in China because I'm now getting those Chinese phone calls on my cell phone that I don't answer. And then when the voice is played back, I play it. It's in Chinese. So they're working again. So I guess that's some of the good news. Our house cleaners have stopped coming, both directly because of the virus, and the business closed down. And she said that she's worried about getting them back with a $600 a week add-on to unemployment. She said that may be more money than they would make working. And so I'm getting used to doing, along with Sheila and her brother Michael, who's living with us, doing laundry. And as you know, but you've been in our house many times. So 6 bedrooms and 2 half baths. We got 8 toilets to clean every week. So the coronavirus is touching us, but those are trivial things. The fact that I can't get a haircut because the club is closed down is trivial compared to the tragedy and suffering that many people are going through. So let's ask God's help and hope that this will come to an end as soon as possible.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing that. Now, in the last episode, you referred to a very unfortunate event that happened with my grandfather, your dad. Tell us about that, Dad.
That was in 1954, and I think November. I want to show you a picture of my dad and David and me from 1954 in September. The notation written by my brother Joe on the back is it was taken at Cleveland. So this was before his accident, and I think was probably when Joe was treating us to a Cleveland Indians game, which he did on more than one occasion. But what happened was that my dad was working for Wonder Bread. He was thankful to have the job. He'd come from Somerset. And there was something, he was 50 years old. And I think they had a deal that you had retirement, Social Security was like at 65, and you had to be in a retirement plan for 15 years before you collect. And they said, you better come on board now. And he just made it. He was happy to have that job. And part of his job was maintenance of the equipment. And it wasn't an elevator, but it was a leveler. It went down about, probably 4 feet. And he was down beneath cleaning it, maintaining it somehow. And what it was, racks of bread would come out from the ovens ready to be put in trucks. And the rack would go on this leveler. It would lower down to the level where the trucks were parked and then roll out and
So we may be experiencing some internet problems, and I'm not sure if my dad is still online. If he is, he may be able to hear me, but I can no longer hear him, and we have a frozen photo. So stand by and let's see. So we had a little bit of an internet issue. Did your screen freeze at all?
it kind of flashed up and then came back, and I see you again.
Okay.
I want to put it back on gallery view. There you are.
Okay. So these kind of things have been happening during this pandemic. Everyone's online. So you were telling us when you kind of got cut off about the accident, and so you told us about the leveler. So maybe pick up from there.
Well, so he heard it coming down, laid flat on the ground at the floor, and it came down and it crushed him and broke some bones and could well have killed him had it gone any further. But he survived, but he didn't work for a long time. I don't remember exactly, like 6 months. He was on workers' compensation in the state of Ohio. My dad never made much money to begin with. And then to have a reduction being injured, it was a very difficult time. So I was invited to stay with Joe and Evelyn for a period of time. He was in the eighth grade, in the fall of the eighth grade. I lived with them for several months, and that was really a great experience. Just a loving, lovely family. Karen was a baby, and while I was there and later on, they'd go out and Joe would pay me to babysit Karen while I would watch television. I remember watching Jackie Gleason. You probably don't remember The Honeymooners, but I was watching it the real time, Jackie Gleason and The Honeymooners. And it was the only time that I remember anyone from my family, when they had parents' night to come to school, ever came. But Dad couldn't do that kind of thing. He was walking 2 miles to work, no car. But Joe came to school. I remember talking to the basketball coach, and I was very pleased to have someone from my family there. And another thing, it sounds kind of, I guess, pretty ordinary, but it wasn't to me. I always packed my own lunches and wore ate in the cafeteria when I was at home. And Evelyn packed me the nicest lunches. It's funny how you remember some things. That was 65 years ago or so. And I remember the nicest lunches, sandwiches, little brown paper bag, cookies and an apple or something, and napkins. She put a napkin in there. That was just that was a treatment that I was used to. She was such a sweetheart. And that was also during the time of the polio epidemics. We had not pandemics, I guess, but epidemics. And I remember Joe, I'd been staying with him. I'd just gone back to live with my family. And Joe came over one Saturday morning and said, "Charlie, you got to go with me." I said, "Where are we going?" What do you mean? And he took me to Cuyahoga Falls to a health clinic where they were administering the new polio vaccine. And the Salk vaccine, I guess it was. And so I got the vaccine. That's just an example. Dad couldn't do that. Probably wouldn't know about the clinics and everything. And that's the kind of thing that, in retrospect, meant so much to me. So we needed money. And I remember inquiring about getting a paper route. And paper routes there were really hard to get. They were good jobs for kids to have. And I remember Mr. Greathouse was his name, was the supervisor of paper boys. He came to the house. I remember he met Dad and I guess my stepmother. I don't remember all of it. But I think he saw the need that the family needed money, and I was interviewed. So I was hired to be an Akron Beacon Journal paper boy. And the paper was it's sold on over the counter for a nickel and a dime on Sunday. So that's 45 cents a week. I had 100 customers, and so I would collect $45. And out of that, I got to keep $16. That was a lot of money to me in 1955. And in order to get the paper route, you had to put down a $25 bond. Of course, I didn't have $25. I remember I asked Joe if he would loan me the money, and he did. And after a week or so, I vividly remember being in their apartment. They were living on the second floor on Jewett Street. Being there, Joe was sitting at a desk. And I said, "Joe, here's the $25, thank you." And I remember Joe saying, "Hey, Evelyn, Charlie's here, and he wants to give me the 25. He wants to pay me back the $25. But he wouldn't take the money."
Oh, that's a really sweet story.
It's a true story. And so here I had $25 I didn't expect to have. And so I was walking home, and we lived on kind of the west side, and Joe was on the east side, so I had to walk through town. And downtown was a store that sold something I've always wanted, never had, Levi's. I always wore just generic blue jeans, And so I wanted Levi's with the cool stitching on the back pockets and the little leather patch that, goes to the belt loop, is Levi's. And I was so pleased. And I was so happy to get Levi's and to wear those to school. And I didn't do it to learn to be responsible, but you learn to be responsible because Beacon Journal said, we have people who look forward to that paper every day. And if you're late or if you miss them, it just ruins their whole day. And I understand that. In fact, it's funny, this morning, I went outside because I get the Wall Street Journal and the Times, and there were 2 Wall Street Journals and no New York Times. And then I could see a car coming up, and our security, we have a security car that just circles around. And he's trying to kind of wave me down. I said, by the way, is the paper delivery woman still here? He said, yeah, I think she's on the back road here. I said, well, she gave me 2 Wall Street Journals and no New York Times. He said, well, let me go find her. I gave him one of the Wall Street Journals. In a few minutes, she came back. Sorry, sir. And she gave me the New York Times. So now that I'm an old person reading newspapers, I know now how my customers felt when I brought that Akron Beacon Journal to their homes in the afternoons. And I got, so I made 2 cents for each daily paper and made 4 cents for getting up Sunday morning, regardless of the weather, and delivering the Sunday papers. But it was a good experience. And you learn a lot about people in all kinds of homes, good homes, bad homes, people fighting, people not fighting, dogs chasing you, some people not wanting to pay you or stiffing you or whatever. It was a real great experience. We don't have paper boys anymore. We have, like I did this morning, adults in cars throwing them out the windows. It's really changed.
So a follow-up on that paper route, I had some paper routes as a kid. Now, did you have customer service issues? Like, would someone on occasion phone and say, hey, the newspaper got wet, or I didn't get my newspaper, or someone stole my paper? Was there any kind of activity like that for someone that wasn't happy?
Yes. And I would be so upset when a delivery would come. The papers were dropped off from a truck, and there'd be a stamp on there, letter inside. Uh-oh. And now the letter is either good news or bad news. Good news would be a new customer called in and wanted delivery. Bad news would be a complaint. And you wouldn't get many complaints before Mr. Greathouse would be calling on you because he got a copy of the complaint. And so if you missed somebody or if you were late, and they called the Beacon Journal, that was a very serious thing. But I was never fired. I was able to I didn't get too many to lose my job.
So I remember when I had a paper route, I loved it around the holidays. In December, I quite often would get a nice little extra tip as I was collecting money. Did you remember getting any tips did any of your customers tip you?
Oh, I was astonished. I made like $50. I mean, it was huge. I mean, a very common tip would be to give me $1 instead of the 45 cents. Well, when you're getting an extra 50 cents from 100 people, that's $50. And I remember getting, yes, you're absolutely right. I remember getting substantial tips around Christmas time. I mean, it was like when I remember going trick-or-treating as a kid in Somerset. A typical thing might be a piece of chewing gum. And the first time we went trick-or-treating in Akron, filled a big shopping bag. I couldn't believe it. All these people gave all kinds of stuff, much more prosperous, more people living in more densely populated housing as well. So it was a different world.
Wow, that's so interesting. So let's shift gears a little bit. I want to learn a little bit more about your step family because I really don't know that much about. Can you talk a little bit more about your step family?
Yes, when my dad remarried, he remarried Lola. She was a widow and she had 3 children. The oldest was Don, and then a girl named Barbara, and then Pat was close to my age. They didn't have it easy. They definitely didn't have it easy. I think the big problem we had was just a clash of values. For example, I remember Lola just giving David a hard time when David would be home, because why are you going to college? Why don't you work and give money and help your dad? That kind of thing, not seeing the value of an education. I do have an old picture that I will share with you of the family. Let me hold it up and you see what everybody looks like. Is that in focus? Is that a good view?
Yes, sorry,
So,
I had my microphone muted. Yeah, that's great. So why don't you describe that? That's hold it right there. And can you name everyone in that photo? Do you remember who all those folks are?
sure do, of course. In the Navy uniform was Don, and behind Don was Barbara. Next to Barbara is my dad, and to my dad's right, I guess it is Joe. And over his shoulder is Fanny. She seems to have something around her head, like a scarf or a towel or something. I don't remember what this occasion was. And then next in line there is Pat with kind of the fuzzy hair. Lola's in the corner. And then seated at the table is David. And that's me in the middle, kind of goofing around, eating. So it was, we had a lot of good times. And we had some times that weren't so good as well. We had a share of trouble. But it's funny, Dad and Lola seem to have had a pretty good marriage. One of the things that became a source of irritation that never really worked out, Dad was so easygoing. Because their fathers had died, Pat and Barbara both got a monthly check from Social Security. And that was for their upkeep, I guess. But that's not what it went for. None of that, to my knowledge, ever went to buy food for the family or to Dad or anything. But they would splurge on clothes and movies and stuff when they had it. The money would run out after a couple of weeks, and they'd wait for the next check. Once I got a paper out, then that wasn't really as much of a problem. But prior to that, I remember Joe coming to the house, and probably another Easter story. It may have been after Easter, I'm not sure the occasion. But Barbara walked out and said, look, here's what I got. And I got this, whatever, showed the clothes. And Pat did the same thing. And Joe said, well, Charlie, what did you get? And nothing. And he went in and he raised really a ruckus with Dad and Lola. Lola could have cared less, so Joe was saying. And Joe probably didn't really know that the money was from Social Security, not from Dad and Lola money. It was from Social Security. And so it was kind of their money. And the same way, I guess, that the paper route was kind of my money, although I shared with the family on many occasions. I remember I bought a linoleum for the kitchen, a linoleum rug that I had to go down. So they were tough times, tough on them. Don would come home on leave, and he was just a good old country boy. There's nothing wrong with Don. When he got out of the Navy, I remember he got a job installing carpet. Well, somebody can do that kind of work. It's a good skill and honest labor. And I heard that Barbara died fairly early in age. She had a boy, Mikey, who lived with us, but she wasn't married. And the last I saw Pat was, many, many years ago. She was working in, I think, St. Thomas Hospital, and behind the lunch counter or the it was the gift shop, behind the gift shop counter. So then we lost track of them. Lola died when I was at Florida State about my sophomore year. And of course I didn't attend the funeral or anything. And my dad then moved back into the same building that everything started in, the same house on Jewett Street, where Joe and Evelyn had lived and where I stayed. And it was owned by the Schaefer family. Mr. and Mrs. Schaefer lived in front and this house was in the back. And Dad moved into the ground floor and lived there for a number of years until he remarried for the third time to a nice woman named Nellie, who we met and everything. I didn't ever really get to know her well. I wasn't around that much, but that was the step family.
Well, that's interesting. I remember the little house that he lived in behind the Schaefer's house. That's when I was a boy. So he lived in that house where the Schaefers lived, and you lived in that house as well?
The house behind the Schaefer's house.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
did you live in that house for a period of time?
No, except when I was living with Joe and Evelyn, no,
Okay.
no.
Oh, I see.
That was he moved there after I was gone and married and gone to Florida and everything.
So around this time that you've been describing, you were in what, maybe junior high?
Yeah.
And what was that like? What was your experience like in junior
Well,
high school?
West Junior High was so far different than the little grade school that I had gone to, grades 1 through 8 in Somerset. It was far more sophisticated. The kids were more sophisticated. The teachers were good. I have a lot of great memories there, and I had a lot of fun. And it was the first time I knew any Jewish kids or met any Jewish kids. There were no Jewish kids that I knew of in Somerset. I know David Katz sat next to me. He's a great guy. And he and I, so what kids do, he and I had a crush on the same girl. And it's approaching, I guess, Easter, not Easter, Christmas. And neither of us had much money. So we both wanted to give her a gift. So we put our money together. And his mother worked at O'Neill's department store in downtown Akron. And she bought a sweater. So David and I gave Bonnie, the woman's name was Bonnie Phipps. She was a beauty, blonde, great looking kid. So we put together to give her a Christmas gift. She must have laughed about it. Her parents must have thought, what, 2 boys gave you a gift? That was pretty weird. And interestingly, when I was a district manager in Toledo, traveling with one of my sales reps, went into a physician's office and I saw her behind the reception counter in like in a white uniform. And I said, you Bonnie Phipps? And she said, yeah, it's Chuck Hardwick. And so we sat for a few minutes in a little side room and talked. Turned out she was working there for her husband, who was a physician. And it was really coincidence to run into it. But it wasn't that far from Akron. I guess it wasn't too surprising. And then another interaction with a girl there that has stayed with me over the years. Her name was Sandra Siegel, really a nice girl. I thought she was very attractive and smart, and I liked her a lot. And at the junior high, they were having a dance. And I remember asking her, Sandra, would you go to the dance with me? And we'd been pretty friendly. She said, oh, that sounds like fun. She said, I'll let you know tomorrow. And so next day she came in and I saw her and she said, sorry, my parents won't let me go to the dance with you. I said, oh, really? Why not? I said, well, because you're not Jewish. I thought, oh. So that kind of set me back a little bit. A life experience being on the receiving end of discriminatory thinking, but it stayed with me over the years. But I understand now it was certainly not personal. The parents never knew me, not personal, but in the Jewish community, there was real concern about interfaith marriage because so many times the Jewish member of the marriage turned Christian or whatever it was. They married. So there was a real move to try to slow that kind of thing down. I understand that now. Didn't understand it so much when Sandra wouldn't go to the dance with me.
Oh, that's really interesting. I've been to Akron to visit family, and I've seen a little bit about it. But of course, that was in the '60s and the '70s. What was it like when you were living there in the 1950s? Describe your neighborhood.
The neighborhood it was called Myrtle Place, so it wasn't a through street, which was good because we could often play out in the street. But one of the funniest things, there was a family across the street and down a couple of houses called the Brandt family. They had 16 children, 16 children. And Mr. Brandt, who had a handicapped leg, a kind of a withered leg, walked with a limp, he did maintenance work for St. Vincent's School and Church, which was just across the street from where my house was located. And they were such a remarkable family, like a lot of Roman Catholic families back then. They were proud to have a son who was a priest. And in their living room was a big picture of their son who was the priest. They were very proud of that. But I spent a lot of time, the whole neighborhood, spent a lot of time at their house on Saturdays, and we would play cards for money. That's where I learned to play blackjack and guts. And then Mrs. Brandt would offer lunch to everyone. God bless her, all those kids to feed. I remember seeing her open up packages of hot dogs, putting them down in boiling water and having buns, and we'd all help ourselves to a hot dog. But an amazing family. I remember Gus Brandt was one of the coolest guys I'd ever met. He was a couple of years older than I was. He used to sit on the stoop over the local grocery store and drink Pepsi Cola. It's the greatest drink in the world, he used to say. And then later in the 50s, they moved to Los Angeles. And I've often wondered what happened to all those Brandt kids. And of course, I don't really know. I lost track of them.
Well, you ought to look them up on Facebook. You might be able to see what they're like.
Maybe.
Well, Dad, we're just about out of time for this episode. This has been a real treat to hear some of these stories. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. And I look forward to maybe doing episode 4 in the near future.
Thanks, Chuck. I always love spending time with you, and take care of Helen, and you guys stay safe.
Thanks, Dad. You too. I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.